Thank you, Ken, for that kind and exceedingly embarrassing introduction. But I forgive you. And seriously, thank you, Ken, for your fine work that you and the Hudson Institute does to help us understand the world and America's role in the world. I've known Ambassador Nikki Haley since she came to prominence in South Carolina politics. There's no question from the very beginning that she was going to be a star. The only question was how big, how high. That's a question, by the way, we all understand is still unanswered. Her stardom does not emerge as a natural ingredient or natural result of a political dynasty. She's a child of immigrants. She's also a principled conservative, and she was elected to the state legislature at the age of 32. 6 years later, she became governor of South Carolina, which, like many other places, was being crushed by the recession caused by the great financial crash of '08. During her time in office, she was an economic dynamo, cutting the unemployment rate in South Carolina by half, creating 400,000 jobs, and recruiting businesses like Volvo and Continental Tire to build new plants. She also guided her state through some dark days, especially the horrific 2015 shooting at the African American church in Charleston. Her leadership throughout was strong, graceful, and principled. It did not emerge from political calculations. It was just who she was and who she is. Even as governor, Nikki showed leadership on an international level. She led the effort to make South Carolina the very first state to adopt legislative protections against the anti-Israel boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Nikki was then, and is now, a true friend, a strong friend of Israel, and American Jews know it. Watching Nikki walking into a room full of pro-Israel Zionists is to experience real excitement. And she's essentially humble. At the recent AIPAC conference, introduced to 15,000 screaming Jews, she wondered for a moment who had just shown up. Perhaps she could get an autograph. It was only natural for President Trump to make, in my view, one of his best appointments, giving Governor Haley the task of representing America at the United Nations. This is a job for heavyweights, for leaders who speak with moral clarity and who have a really thick skin. Heading the U.S. delegation at Turtle Bay is a job that Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Jeane Kirkpatrick, and John Bolton have held, as well as a job that George H.W. Bush held. May he rest in peace. Nikki has extended this tradition of standing America's ground in, quote, a dangerous place, close quote, as Moynihan said. Over the last 2 years, she's confronted a world beset by instability and danger. Rogue regimes seek to become nuclear states. Major powers try to reassemble lost empires and long-collapsed spheres of influence. And then there's the United Nations itself, hardly a model of efficient and just leadership, and a place where moral clarity is hard to come by. Well, hard to come by everywhere except in the office of America's ambassador. In Ambassador Haley's world, right is right and wrong is wrong. Friends are friends and outlaws are outlaws. Simple concepts, but in a time of twisted values, it takes a strong, smart, and grounded leader to grasp and not let go of what is right. America is not only the greatest power in the world, it's a superpower that stands for liberty, the rule of law, and human rights. Nikki Haley isn't confused about America's role in the world. Nikki Haley kicks back and she stands straight. Why has she been so vocal about injustice, so quick to call out those who would harm their neighbors or their own people? In part, it's because Nikki knows that American power and American principles are fundamentally linked. Some people like to quote John Quincy Adams' remark that America, quote, does not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy, close quote. But Nikki Haley understands that in a world as small as ours has become, if you don't pay attention to the monsters, they will come in search of you. Tonight, Nikki is accepting the Hudson Institute's Global Leadership Award, an honor she richly has earned. We still don't know what the future holds in store for her. I know I speak for the room when I say that we're sure looking forward to finding out. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Nikki Haley.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. I want to start, before I go into my comments, to pay tribute to the late President Bush. I found this quote that he gave to the United Nations. It was, quote, "The human spirit cannot be locked up forever. The truth is, people everywhere are motivated in much the same ways, and people everywhere want much the same things: the chance to live a life of purpose, the chance to choose a life in which they and their children can learn and grow healthy, worship freely, and prosper through the work of their hands and their hearts and their minds." We're not talking about the power of nations, but the power of individuals, the power to choose, the power to risk, the power to succeed. I think that we can all learn from President Bush's comments. So I do want to I meet lots of people who are dedicated to the advancement of liberty and the values that make us special. Paul Singer stands out among them. Thank you for being such a great friend. Thank you for being such a great friend and ally to all of us who care about the future of our country. I'm proud to share this honor with my friend Paul Ryan, whose principled leadership will sorely be missed in Washington. But the silver lining is that Paul and I can hang out together in the unemployment line. So I am looking forward to that. And I thank the Hudson Institute for this honor. The Hudson Institute understands something that's very important. American leadership is indispensable to the advancement of freedom. If anyone doubts this, I welcome them to spend a day at the United Nations Security Council. If the United States fails to lead on behalf of our values at the United Nations, our values are simply not going to be advanced. In fact, more often than not, freedom, free markets, and human rights suffer at the UN when U.S. leadership is lacking. There is a belief in parts of the media and in some foreign policy circles that American leadership has declined under this administration. I absolutely reject that conclusion. I believe the record shows a reemergence of the United States leadership in the world under this administration, not an abandonment of it. For example, just last week, Russian forces fired and seized 3 Ukrainian naval ships in a shared waterway near Crimea. It was a serious escalation and an outrageous, blatant provocation. The next day, Russia called for an emergency UN Security Council meeting with the topic listed as violation of the borders of the Russian Federation. It was up to the United States, along with key allies, to oppose the Russians and represent the interests of the Ukrainian people in the Security Council. I spoke to President Trump, and we agreed that a strong condemnation of Russia's aggression was needed, which I was happy to deliver. What the administration's critics miss, purposely or not, is that leadership isn't always popular. As a matter of fact, real leadership usually makes someone mad. It can sometimes make our friends mad too. but that's okay. This administration's predecessors at the United Nations were less concerned about the U.S. leading and more concerned about avoiding the U.S. being isolated at the UN. They didn't want other countries to be upset with us. This got so ridiculous that when Cuba brought up their annual resolution condemning America and blaming us for all of Cuba's problems, the Obama administration abstained. Abstained. That was a no-brainer for us to reverse. In our approach, we always seek the support of other countries, but not at the expense of our values, not at the expense of our leadership. Our predecessors didn't want to rock the boat. We made the conscious decision that it's better to be respected. That means the administration has advanced U.S. leadership, sometimes through cooperation with others, sometimes through standing alone. When the United States got out of the Iran nuclear deal, our European friends were not happy. But most telling was how upset the terrorist government in Iran was. The Iran deal was a bad deal for the security of the United States and for the world. It was a bad deal for the Iranian people, but it was a good deal for the Iranian government. Now, the Western money that Iran used to fund Hezbollah, send missiles to Yemen, and fight alongside Assad in Syria is now drying up. And thanks to our leadership, the Iranian people who are risking their lives to protest their government know they now have an ally in the United States of America. This administration has led in confronting the North Korean nuclear threat. Previous administrations of both parties either attempted to appease North Korean regime or kicked the can down the road. With U.S. leadership, the United Nations has leveled more sanctions against North Korea than any country in a generation. Now we're in tough and real negotiations. But with Pyongyang, we don't know yet what the outcome of these talks will be. But there's no question we are in a better place than what we inherited from previous administrations. The United States has led the world in fighting ISIS and been remarkably successful. The situation in Syria remains very messy, but ISIS is nearly destroyed, and this administration has enforced the red line against the barbaric Assad regime's use of chemical weapons. At the UN, we are no longer a member of the UN Human Rights Council, a council that does more to mock the cause of human rights than to advance it. This was not a popular decision among other countries, but it was the right one. Others told us we had to stay in the Human Rights Council because we were the last shred of credibility it had. To which we replied, that's exactly why we shouldn't be there. The United States has stood up for the people of Venezuela when others have stayed silent. We called out the Maduro dictatorship for ruining the once thriving Venezuelan economy. We've made it clear that they, and they alone, have robbed the Venezuelan people of their basic human rights. Our leadership has brought around the Organization of American States and regional countries to this cause for freedom. And this president has done what previous presidents pledged to do, but never did: move the United States Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. For acknowledging the obvious truth that Jerusalem is the capital of the modern state of Israel, we were accused of setting back the peace process. But the United States led, and in fact, our leadership has clarified the path to peace. A peace process that is damaged by the simple recognition that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel is not a peace process at all. It is a justification for an endless stalemate. Peace must be built on truth. By telling the truth, this administration has advanced the cause of peace. Leadership is a function of confidence. My entire public life, I have worked to help people find the power of their voice. I am proud to have been a part of the United States rediscovering the power of her voice at the United Nations. No other country can lead the way the United States can lead. The rest of the world knows that and respects it, even if they don't always say so. America leads the world not because of who we are, but because of what we believe. That the daughter of Indian immigrants has had the privilege to give voice to our values at the United Nations is a testament to the power of those beliefs. I will never stop being inspired by the greatness of America. And like you, I will never stop advocating its strong moral leadership in the world. Thank you, and God bless.
What more to say? Ambassador Haley, we give Hudson Institute's Global Leadership Award on the very rare occasion when we can celebrate exceptional leaders who have made extraordinary contributions to the security, prosperity, and freedom of the United States and its allies. Perfect description of Ambassador Nikki Haley, yes? As Paul Singer outlined, as a South Carolina legislator and governor, you led the people of your state deftly. And then you came to New York and announced to the world there was a new sheriff in town. Indeed, we just heard from her. You demonstrated a clear-eyed, rock-ribbed leadership that has been sadly missing for the 8 years previously. I think you're the most consequential U.S. ambassador to the UN ever. And I include you with the giants like Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Jean Kirkpatrick. Their words, like yours, were potent. You speak with conviction and without using diplomatic doublespeak. You've called out North Korea, Iran, Syria, and stood strong against the anti-Israel bias at the UN. Your actions have also been extraordinary. In this room, I don't need to cite the many instances in which you have effectively strengthened Americans' friends and stymied our adversaries. As a result, the U.S. is more respected, as you've outlined, and that makes the world a far safer place. You embody American values, those great values you talked about, in all that you say and do. And personally, you've become a role model for me and to millions of others. So it is my great honor to award you Hudson's Global Leadership Award. Friends, sit down. I think we could probably clap all night for Ambassador Haley, and we're Speaker Ryan here for him too. It's been an extraordinary evening. We've heard from two of our nation's leading public servants, which, as I have learned over the years, is not out of the ordinary at Hudson Institute. Engaging serious policymakers in deep discussions and offering thorough analysis of the prosperity and security of our country is what we do and what we have done since 1961. It is my great privilege to be able to offer some thank yous before we get to eat dessert. First, many, many thanks to Ambassador Nikki Haley and Paul Ryan for their remarks. And mostly, thank you for your service to our great country. Second, I want to give my heartfelt thanks to the Hudson staff whose hard work have made this evening possible. You know who you are, and you know I love you. I also want to thank the Hudson experts whose brilliant work advances the interests of our country. Thank you for what you do to keep us all safe at night. And third, I want to thank everybody in this room. Thank you for your support because of this dinner. You make everything that happened tonight and day in and day out at Hudson possible. You are all heroes in my book.